People who won, or inherited, or earned, a large amount of money, in a short amount of time. What was the biggest change? You start identifying the things that can be fixed with money, and those that cannot. I heard Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's billionaire business partner, say, "There's nothing more useless to a 90-year-old man than $2 billion. God, this is so true. Didn't get a large windfall, but I've been making enough to be comfortable. Emergency expense? Stable source of food, clothing, shelter? Little bit of F-around money for fun? Yep, that feels better. Toxic relationships? Investing in mental or physical health? Yeah, money makes some of these easier, but it definitely ain't gonna fix it." Not me, but my sister. 2017, she had no permanent residence, bouncing from couch to couch. She was working for minimum wage, just keeping herself afloat. Something happened, and my nephew, son of a different sister, was taken into protective custody, and she and I took on the responsibility together. I moved them into my house, which was really small, so they had to share the living room. She worked really hard and saved to get a tiny apartment for them, struggled to furnish it and pay the bills, but she did it. Then another one of my sisters OD'd on heroin, with my niece present. Luckily for her, there was Narcan on hand, and someone smart enough to administer it, so my niece was also taken into protective custody, and my sister took her on, as well. The money from CPS and state benefits helped, but they still struggled. Then in 2019, her estranged bio-father committed death, and the trust fund that her bio-grandfather set up was passed down to his only living relative, my sister. Literally overnight, she became a very well-off person. She owns a really nice house now, has a new car, her backyard is like a paradise for my nephew and the 2 other foster kids she took in. My niece ended up back with her mom, after she completed rehab, etc., and she never has to work again. They went for absolutely nothing. No one deserved it more than her. I'm less reluctant to speak my mind at work. Having the good for you option available is very liberating. Yeah, they call that FU money for a reason. I am close to retirement. Firing me will cost the company much more than just tolerate me the last few months. It is liberating. Nice. I am 5 days from retiring myself, as well. First thing I am doing is getting healed up. I can't sleep due to shoulder pain, and I can't drive due to sciatica. Gotta fix these first, then I can relax. A company I was vested with sold. I made well into the 7 figures. Didn't touch it for a year, at the advice of a business mentor. It was probably the best advice I've ever gotten. It really stopped any potential lifestyle creep in its tracks. Now, I don't have to take shit at work, and can spend as much time with my kids as I want. Friends of mine received a large legal settlement, and they received it tax-free in a single check. The first word of advice that their financial advisor gave them was not to touch it for at least a year. Don't make any abrupt lifestyle changes, don't make big purchases, etc. Just let it percolate for a year. So, that's what they did, and they made some slow lifestyle changes, got a bigger house, got one new car, then another, took some trips, did some renovations on the new house. However, this was all over years, so it didn't attract much attention. Their advisor invested well on their behalf, and even after all those purchases, they still have more money than they started with. However, what they did took some restraint and discipline that not everyone has when receiving a large windfall. My relatives and I divided the inheritance equally, each bought an apartment, no one took more, acted humanely. I have 2 siblings. One sibling is a lawyer. The other sibling will F a homeless person out of money, if she could. I already know my parents have put the lawyer in charge of handling everything after they kicked the bucket. I decided years ago that I'm not even going to bother with it when the time comes, because it'll just piss me off. People turn up out of the woodwork when they hear you have a lot of money. When I signed a massive deal at the company I owed, and I assume my mom told a bunch of people, suddenly, friends and family I hadn't heard from in years, wanted to spend time together. Same, when my mom passed away, in both cases I wanted to think it was for altruistic reasons, but the timing was just too convenient. The interaction between my existing friend group, who also knew about these events, did not change. Edit, thank you Reddit, for doing exactly what would be expected of you. We inherited a substantial amount of money recently. We knew there was an inheritance coming, but it was easily 3 times more what we thought it was. My day-to-day life didn't change. I still work, same job, as does my husband. Everything is the same, except relief, when thinking about the future, which is huge. We took half and put it in an account for our kids, their college, grad school, etc. are completely paid for. We then took the other half, and hired an advisor we know well, to invest it for our retirement. The plan is, to park it until we both stop working, still decades away. We also cut big checks to our beloved niece, for school in the future, and 2 charities, that are close to our hearts. The thought that our future is secure, is breathtakingly amazing. Oh, I'll add that, we told almost no one about this money, and I think this was the best advice we got and took. Only very close family, who we trust, knows about this money. It also helped that our life didn't outwardly change. We have the same home, same cars, etc. No one came asking for money, because no one knows that we have it. It's the advice I'd give anyone in our shoes. Tell no one. Nothing changed for us. Matriarch of the family realized, nobody is really financially educated enough, to handle a change, from middle class, to that. So, she proposed, everyone puts their slice of the cake, into state bonds. At the moment, the gains beat inflation by a good bit. We're not American, and that's what everybody did. We all essentially tossed the can, 5 years down the road, and are living exactly the same as before. Not having a dad anymore. I remember my dad telling me, that he was able to buy a new car, with the money he had gotten, because his dad had passed. And that he couldn't tell his dad, or show him. My dad left us a large sum of money, as well as investments. We were already comfortable. I'd trade every penny, and then some for more time with my dad. We just took a trip, to reset, after his prolonged illness, but the one person I wanted to share the trip with, is no longer there. Miss you, Dad. Fixing things, is no longer about, the cheapest way to do it yourself, but about weighing a good DIY solution, versus just writing a check, and being done with it. For example, a tree needs to be cut down. Without money, you think about what saw you can use or borrow. Renting is a last resort, but viable. With money, you think that owning a chainsaw would be useful, so, maybe you should buy one. Beyond that, do I really want to drop this thing myself, or should I just find someone to do it, for $500? As a specific answer, I now pay someone, to cut my grass. I stopped caring about keeping my job, since I have a safety net from stonks. I can push back on stuff, that's unreasonable now, and I'm a lot more confident, when asking for raises, knowing, I can comfortably quit, anytime. This is me. I don't have FU money, but I have enough and a level of expertise in my field, where if I'm working somewhere, or on a project, that I don't agree with, I can just get up one day, and not come back. I'm a network engineer. We are famous for just noping the F right out the door. I get a $10,000 to $20,000 raise, every time I do it. Motorcycle accident with truck in 2016. Traumatic brain injury and a broke right arm, and helicopter to ICU, to breathing tube, and feeding tube to rehab, for years, to get my mind functioning again. Lawyered up, and got $300,000 from the trucking company. I'm making my monthly mortgage payments, from that money. It's a house, but good God, I would never want anyone, to ever go through, what I or my family, who supported me the whole way, went through. Stress levels before and after. It's like night and day. Being poor is stressful. Very stressful. Having money, means having options, that coincidentally means, less worrying about making things work, and more focus on actually figuring them out. Which leads to more success. You simultaneously have more options, while ending up needing plan B, less. It's almost cruel. Money doesn't bring happiness, but it absolutely kills 90% of actual real-life day-to-day stress. Which kind of paves the way for positive change. I inherited about $500,000 from my dad, plus some real estate. After I bought a house and a car, I was still left with quite a bit, but I was in a really bad place. My dad's death was very sudden, and affected me very badly, so, I was wasting money left and right, on going on vacations, and buying stupid shit, and going to fancy dinners. Most of it wasn't left over, and so, my life, was more or less the same. The only difference was, that my family now owned a house, and had a couple of nice cars. The story you are described, is exactly why our money, won't drop on our kids all at once, if we die early. It'll come in installments over decades, allowing them to spend some, and still know, more is on the way. Hopefully by the third one, they'll have it all figured out. When I was younger, my family sued my elementary school district for negligence when I repeatedly reported bullying, but they ignored it, eventually culminating in SA. The district settled for $200,000-ish, but I was to get it in installments when I turned 18. The first installment was $13,000. It was a hell of a nice birthday present. The biggest change was, I didn't need to rush finding a job and I was able to pay for my associate's degree 100% out of pocket, and take a trip to Japan, before adult responsibilities started, which I always wanted to do. Also, doing stuff with friends was no biggie, because doing things, like movies, was pretty much pocket change. I did get a job, a few months after graduating high school, but I also knew, if I lost it, I would be okay, so, I got to not stress too much about it, even though, I ended up doing so, anyway. Unfortunately, I also had zero experience managing money, since my family had horrible money management, and no one ever taught me how to be responsible with money. I went through all of that first installment, in less than a year, on dumb crap, the only thing being really valuable was, paying for school and traveling. To this day, I'm still kicking myself, for a decision I never made. At one point, there was a house that needed some work but it was all pretty minor, things I could either learn to do on my own, at worst hire someone to do pretty cheaply, like painting the house, replacing a couple of pipes, and swapping out some boards on the back porch. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room, full kitchen, and 2 bathrooms with showers in both. We lived in a small town, and knew the property owner, and he offered to sell me the house and the land for $120,000 with a meager $1,000 down payment, as soon as I could get a mortgage. This was an insane deal, and I was such an idiot for not realizing that. Could have fixed that house up, and used it to work up to a bigger house. Advice to anyone who has received, or will be receiving a settlement: put like 90% of that shit in savings, and pay for everything with your salary. Trust me. In this economy, being able to afford a down payment on a house is everything. You know how, on online shopping, or real estate listings, you can list things, highest price to lowest? I thought that was hilarious, and that nobody would ever use it. It turns out that it's really useful when money is no object, and you prefer to not spend time looking at the lower end options. I inherited $100K from my grandmother. Put it all into high yield accounts, interest payments every month got larger, and I feel way less stressed about money now. I do withdraw a little every year, on my birthday, to treat myself. Other than that, I refuse to touch any of it, and still live within my means, hoping to use it for down payment one day. For me, it wasn't like a lump sum thing, but rather, my husband joining the IBEW, electrical union, and overnight going from making like $20 per hour, to over $30 per hour, and now up to about $40 per hour, changed our lives. We went from barely making ends meet, to having a savings account, buying a house, a brand new car, finally getting to take proper vacations, even getting to fly on a plane, for the first time, and visit a whole other country. As someone who lived the first 30-some-odd years of my life in poverty, the last decade has been a huge in terms of quality of life. And not just 'cause I can buy name brand toilet paper, and no longer live in a mobile home, but because my stress levels have been significantly lowered, as well. I'm not worrying about bills, I have a little extra money to pursue hobbies and interests, and if something messes up in the house, like my washing machine last month, no problem. I might not be able to afford a brand new one spur of the moment, but I can at least afford to buy a new shift actuator and pump, and fix it myself. So many decisions that were previously dictated by money are now dictated by other factors, with convenience and quality being primary drivers. Don't feel like cooking tonight? Can order out. Can order out at a nice restaurant. Could walk, but also could take an Uber. Could save a few $100s on a less agreeable flight time, but not worth it. New car? Well, if I buy brand new, I can get all the options I want. Yes, even the upgraded audio system. Convenience and quality are addictive drugs. Just received a decent inheritance yesterday. Took $10K of it, and left the rest in a compounding interest account, to build over time, and away from easy reach, so I don't blow it all. Used what I did take it to create an emergency fund. bought myself new clothes, and a few new toys, like a new gun, paid off $1,500 in credit card debt, and probably going to make a larger payment towards my student loans. Still living off of my budget, but being able to fix the AC in my car now and my bumper is a huge win. The stability and lack of worry is really nice, and being positive on my net worth by multiple thousands of dollars is also really nice, but mostly it's the peace of mind that's doing it for me, and I think I won't spend most of it, just because I don't want to give up that peace of mind. Now I don't have debt payments to make other than just $50 a month, so I've regained a lot of spending power, which will let me save faster over time, as well as having a new job with better benefits, and that pays me a $300 bonus once a month for gas and cell phone. Really makes me feel truly financially stable in my life. Not enough to retire on, but enough to get a solid plan for retirement going, and change my life for the better. I'd give it all back, if it meant I got to spend one more day with my grandma and aunt, though. When my father-in-law passed, my wife and her 3 siblings each got $2.2 million in stock and cash from his estate. Having a pretty successful business, it didn't change my or my wife's life, but it set up our 3 daughters and 4th child on the way, with a pretty good nest egg for them to be able to buy their first house, start a business, or take a risk that they otherwise wouldn't be able to do. Note, the money is theirs once they turn 25. Everything changed. Firstly, I lost my father. That was the biggest issue. Then I lost my job over attendance during settling his estate, his home being broken into by his meth head neighbors after they found out he died. Then, his ex-girlfriend sued us for half the estate. Then everyone I know came out of the woodwork, asking for money. Then when I refused to give people money for existing, they all decided that I was in a hole, and didn't want to have anything to do with me. I lost pretty much all of my acquaintances that I thought were my friends. I paid off all my bills, bought a reliable car, then bought a house to make a better life for my children, and put as much away as I could. Only a handful of people continued to be a part of our lives after. I found out quickly who my real friends were. For years, I would whine about how I couldn't do what I wanted, because I had to work to pay the bills. Despite being free of that pressure to make money, I still struggle to do what I want. It's depressing. Edited to add, having to get enough money together to pay rent is the MacGuffin that runs the plot in most people's lives. It's like the briefcase in Pulp Fiction. The plot line of your life may not be about money per se, but without it, there is not a cohesive plot. For years, people work shitty jobs because rent, go to college to get better paying jobs, make housing choices because poor, and scrimp and save in hopes of salvation from all this. But if suddenly this way of living is no longer required, the existential problems of meaning do not necessarily abate. If you take away the need to strive just to survive from a person who has lived decades this way, that person may have a hard time reorienting themselves. Even a shitty job provides a community of sorts, even if it's a community of complaint. Scarcity provides a rubric for decision making. Ask most people what they would do if they did not have to work for money. They will come up with all sorts of fanciful answers. They will talk about going on cruises around the world. They will talk about hiking the Appalachian Trail. They might say something about wanting to travel. Fine. If these far-fetched fantasies come true, eventually one must decide how to live after taking the cruise, the long hike, or the long-delayed European tour. What shall I dedicate myself to? One asks oneself in such a circumstance, and without practice at exercising so much freedom, coming up with an earnest answer takes great effort. I'm an independent contractor, and my job requires a lot of travel, and for years, I made decent money, but it was never really enough to own a home, or really even have my own place. I got to a point where I signed a contract with a massive bonus and all these perks, and essentially went from making slightly more than your average middle manager to clearing $1 million in less than a year. It was literally a life-changing opportunity. The biggest change was just being able to do all the things I held off on doing because I never had the money. I was finally able to buy a home. I bought one for my younger brother too, helped him start his own business, and now he's co-owner of a logistics and shipping company. My sister is disabled, and I was finally able to get her into an amazing long-term care facility. Several of my best friends work with me, and their lives changed in similar ways. In 2 years' time, I didn't just make my own life better, but I helped make the lives of some of the people I care about the most in this world significantly better. People that say money doesn't buy happiness are ridiculous. It changes how everyone you know treats you. Some people will get mega entitled and assume money has no value to you now. Some people will get jealous. A lot of people will suddenly want to be your best friend. You'll be surprised, time and time again, at who it is and how they react. Was able to quit my job and essentially retire in my mid-30s. There was such a great feeling of freedom in not having to be wedded to going to a 9-to-5 job and giving up so much of my time for a paycheck, while also owning my house and car outright, and being able to travel the world in great luxury on a whim. Not a massive amount, maybe half a year's salary, but honestly, the biggest change has been not worrying quite so much about life, which in turn leads to me being better with my day-to-day money, which means that I feel better because I'm not quite running to the end of the account each month. It's a little thing, and I wouldn't say that it is happiness per se, but I guess money can at least buy a little of the stress off. If this ever happens to you, tell none of your friends, only tell people making more money than you, who you can consult. And maintain skepticism of everyone who comes near you. Anticipate jealousy, envy, gossip, users, and opportunists, etc. Seriously, biggest lesson of my life. Seriously, expect D-bags to come at you with everything they have. Carry a very large bat in your back pocket. Invest in Acme bear tracks. Just kidding, but you get the point. Money makes people that don't have it creepy. I inherited about $20,000 from a deceased relative, unexpectedly, and nothing much changed for me, except my peace of mind. It wasn't life-changing money, and in fact, I didn't spend a dime of it, but it made a nice seed for investment, and that investment has done reasonably well, so I have a nice nest egg that is slowly growing. The big thing is that I'm disabled and on a fixed income, so it's so effing nice to know that if some unexpected expense comes along, it's not going to wipe me out or put me in debt over my head that I'll never escape. I inherited $200K when my grandmother passed a few years ago. Enough to get me out of the poverty cycle, not enough to buy a house or live off of for a substantial amount of time. I set aside most of it, but gave myself the luxury of a decent chunk of spending money. With that money, you may think, I bought a bunch of silly things, and I did. But I mostly used it getting good quality things that will make life easier and last a while. A chest freezer, nice dresser, and side tables, a decent fridge, clothes that fit me and look good. I also had the privilege of helping my community so much. Being able to just drop a couple hundred to buy a friend hearing aids, or get someone's not cheap prescription, is amazing. I've been very lucky, and my community doesn't take advantage. They're aware I will always help, but they use it as a last resort safety net. 3 years later, I have half of it left. Without the constant stress of affording everything, I was able to figure out what I want to do with my life, and now that money will be supporting me as I study the next few years. Not quite as much as some, but inherited about $50,000 when my mom passed. We talked before she passed, and agreed that money was to help me finish college, because she knew my dad wouldn't help. Proud to say, I worked part-time and used part of that money to cover living expenses while in school. Made it last 4 years, and I graduated with a bachelor's in nursing. 1000% would spend it the same way again. I inherited money from my grandparents after their passing. The biggest change was that, for once in my life, I was able to breathe and not worry about if I'd have enough for groceries, if I had enough for rent, etc. I could actually buy things I needed, for once, like glasses and clothes. Unfortunately, around the same time, my father started having financial issues, and constantly needing help, and my inheritance has long since run out. It sucks, because I really could use that money right now, with what's going on in my life. I keep praying for a miracle, but it never comes. I'm glad I was able to help my father, but still. Missing my parent mostly. I'm in my 30s, and the only parent in my life died in their 60s. I inherited a total estate in the high 6 to low 7 figures US dollars. Sure, I ended up with a paid-off house, college funds for the kids, newer cars, the house fixed up, an emergency fund, and some investments in the mid-6 figures, but now the only close family I have is the one I made. I trade all of the financial security for my parent back easily, and honestly, it's not enough for me to never worry about money again either, since I still have decades to live, probably live in a high tax state, and inflation. I suspect there will always be that what if worry about money. I still work, although I'm not as worried about losing my job as I was before, and my job is very easy. I need the medical benefits for sure. I ate pretty bad, my drug of choice, for the first 18 months after they died, so I'm getting that weight off, but otherwise, I get random bouts of sadness when alone.